You're listening to Crush Performance, your weekly source for sport performance and athletic development information. Get the Crush blogs, podcasts, and performance links at crushperformance.com. Now, here he is, the Crusher.
Follow me on social media, search up Crush Performance, and you can direct message me there as well. Listen, if you need help with your programs, you have questions about your development, I'm not going to say we have the answers, but I will say this: we know somebody out there who does know the answers, and we answer every single message we get. And here's the other thing, in Crush Performance here, we kind of make it our mandate to get everybody out there maybe thinking about things they haven't thought of before. Well, that's a two-way street. Some of the questions we've gotten here in the new year so far about your development, your teams, your organizations, you guys have gotten us thinking about things that either we haven't thought about in a long time, or maybe we hadn't thought about in the context that you guys are presenting them, which is cool. That's what it's all about. So we're just making each other better here, I feel, and that's the beauty of this relationship. So I'm really excited about today's show. I've often thought in my career that, pushing the limits of human performance wouldn't be quite that difficult. But most certainly, I'm at a point, at least in my career, 30 plus years into the world of elite performance, where I know there's something missing. And it's kind of cool. I go back and think about my trajectory, growing up on the farm, just playing sports, having fun, deciding to go to university, into the phys ed, kinesiology, focusing on, physiology, sports science, psychology. All of those things opened up new doors, new ideas, new ways of thinking about how to develop performance in sport. Here's the other thing, just coming off the Olympics, spring training underway. We got the NHL back after the Olympics as well. NBA's rolling after their All-Star break. I just really, really appreciate elite athletes. And I honestly, such respect for everybody who's found their way there, and for everybody else who's tried but hasn't made it. We tell every one of our athletes as they come into the organization or into our programs, we don't know how good they can actually be. Some of these players are elite professional athletes already. And we still are saying, we don't know how good you guys can get until we go through an organized practice. But yet, despite everything, I can't help but think over the years with everything we've done, my career, for example, started out looking at strength and conditioning, the physical side of performance. How do we make an athlete faster? How do we make them stronger? How do we make them more powerful? How do we help them deal with the demands of their particular sport? And how do you roll that into a long-term development program where here they are at point A, and there, in the end of our plan, 4 years from now, a quadrennial cycle for an Olympic athlete. In 4 years, we want to be there, but in 12 years, we want to be there, right? This beautiful planning, this ebb and flow of performance. The physical side, we have down. Like, there's not an athlete on planet Earth right now that we can't help. Like, collectively, as, coaches in sports science, if we know what we're doing and have a plan, right? I really believe that. And then the Crush brain game comes along, because I learned early on, and that's one of my fascinations with psychology at university, that the brain was one of the limiting factors in human performance. Whether it's thinking strategies, attitude, perception of what's happening, or how an athlete frames things up or deals with stress and anxiety, all those things are real and important. Well, we're getting really good at that as well. We really are, and we're still improving there. And then the biochemistry side, not just nutrition. Nutrition is here. Biochemistry for sport is here. Sport nutrition is different than regular nutrition. We're talking about fueling an athlete for the demands of their sport. Well, we've kind of conquered that over the last 30 years, and it's taken us 20 plus years to really understand that. And that's great. But I can't help but think right now as we sit after this incredible Winter Olympics in Italy, watching some of the most brilliant performances in the history of sport, that we're still missing something. And I don't know if you guys are with me on this. I'd love to hear from you. So please, if you agree with me, I'd like to hear what you guys are thinking. Again, info@jeffgrishel.com. Or direct message me on social media, on Facebook or X or Instagram or wherever, all those platforms. And again, I'm not great on social media, but I do love the interactions. But I'd like to know if you guys agree with me here. Like, what's missing? Well, we have this thing over the show in the last 5-10 years called the crush brain game. And it's more than just psychology, right? The psychology side, I think we've got down, the mental performance side. But the perception side, again, one of our overlying themes for Crush Performance over the last couple of years, this idea of perception and how we interact with the environment to create elite sport outcomes. I know this is the limiting factor in human performance. When we crack this, we're finally going to see what humans can do. Now, let's talk about Usain Bolt, okay? Man, and we look at his world record in the 100 meters. Is that perception going to help him run 100 meters? I don't know about that. I really don't. I just don't know if the brain is needed in those ways to run 100 meters. Though I will say this, in terms of the attitude perception, how he frames things up, it'd be interesting to sit down and talk to him about his mindset in preparing, but also on a race day in the starting blocks, what he does to get mentally prepared. What I'm talking more about, thinking about spring training right now kicking off, baseball or hockey, the unbelievable performance of the U.S. goaltender. I mean, single-handedly won them a gold medal, right? I mean, it was so great to watch. Team Canada was amazing, but it should have been 5-1 if it wasn't for the incredible goaltending. What happens inside that guy's brain as that's all going down? Like, just the chaos of sport fascinates me, and how elite athletes have figured out how to operate at an elite level inside of those environments. Baseball, tennis is one of the great challenges. Golf, how is it so hard to hit a stationary ball down a field of grass? Why is that so hard, right? I just don't think we're really addressing the brain properly. And again, there's components here. There's the brain, and then there's the mind, and then there's the visual cortex, and then there's things like brain budget. Well, that's why I'm excited about today. We are going to get into it with one of my dear friends and colleagues, Mr. Tim Nicely, who's the founder of VFlex Sports. I discovered Tim and all of their thinking through their product called VFlex Sports. And it is a system to help hitters, pitchers, and now athletes in multiple sports really tap into that missing piece of human performance, which is talking the language of the brain. That's what today's show is all about. Now, listen, I'm going to forewarn you. I don't want you to get frustrated or confused by the talk, because again, we're just starting to learn about this stuff holistically, in terms of the industry. We're just really starting to understand how it all works and what it means for our world, which is helping athletes get better. But I can guarantee you this, if you sit down and just sit back and listen, I hope we get you thinking about some things you haven't thought of before, especially if you're a coach. Especially if you're a young athlete or a parent of an athlete. I can't imagine what happens when this type of thinking touches base with our young athletes as they start into the sporting system. And then, if they choose that high performance pathway, what does it mean for the trajectory of their development? Most importantly, with everything we know about the physical world, the biochemical, nutritional world, the brain, mental side of performance. Now we get into the neurological side of how this brain works, perceives, and operates in the chaotic world of sport performance. What does that look like? I personally want to know. I hope I have enough time in this planet to find out, but I think our journey starts here today. Let's get to our conversation with our good friend Tim Nicely of VFlex Sports. All right, everybody. So I am so happy to have on the show once again my good friend, Tim Nicely, who is the founder of VFlex Sports Systems. Tim, welcome back to the show. So glad to have you on here.
Hey, it's good to be back. Good to see you, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the timing here, I love. We just finished an incredible Olympics, and I love the Olympics. I absolutely love them. I'm in withdrawal right now, but performances from all those great athletes, it's just so great to see. Spring training's underway. NHL's back in action. NBA's flying. We got golf. We got tennis. We got rumblings in the NFL, Tim, NCAA sports. I love the world of sports. But my good friend, you and I have had some very interesting conversations over the last couple of years we have a ways to go, I believe, in terms of where we can really take human performance. Do you agree with that?
I do. I do.
Yeah. And hey, Tim, if we look at the VFlex sports systems, and that's kind of how we met through all of your science and your great inventions there, and of course us with our product line. From your perspective, let's just sort of, for our listeners, review what brought you to this point and how the VFlex system came to fruition. Because frankly, my friend, I do believe it's the future of sport.
Uh, Through an injury, really, my cousin had a brain injury, worked on my job site, had a massive brain injury in 1999, and I started studying the brain. I was a high school teacher and coach, coach baseball, basketball, and softball. And when my cousin fell, I took a deep dive into neurons and how to exercise the brain without it knowing that you're exercising it, because my cousin wasn't consciously aware of who she was for about 7 years.
Hmm.
And during that time, I just studied my butt off. And I didn't get a degree for it. I don't have a doctor's degree or anything like that. But with all the technology and all the information that's available to us today, I mean, I really didn't seek out a piece of paper to say that, hey, I'm a real smart fella. I just wanted to take a different angle. I tried not to be influenced by my baseball friends and world. I just I wanted to know how the brain worked, really. And being that I was working with a high school baseball team at that time, man, I had that aha moment that if I can help this person exercise their brain while they're in such a damaged state, that I can help these athletes perform better. I can help their brain process information faster. And that's kind of gave birth to VFlex. I started working with different designs and partial designs and things that didn't work perfect, but they worked a little bit. And they were all clues pointing me into the same direction of, you're going to have to go deeper into the brain if you want to find uh, this magic key, that'll open so many doors. And I just feel fortunate that I've spent my time in there. About 30 years I've spent inside the brain, studying the brain, and on my own terms, looking for what I was looking for. And I've been blessed to have these epiphanies. God's been good to me to open my mind and my eyes, and I'm trying to share it. Although there's a lot of pushback, but it's simply because of, I think, a lack of understanding of the brain, lack of knowledge of the brain, to be honest with you, Jeff.
Yeah, no, that brain, Tim, it is one of the great mysteries of the universe, no question about it. Well, it's very interesting. And I love these conversations. I do, because I'm kind of on the same path. I came at it maybe a little different, a different path than you. But it's sort of merged, and we're on the same path now. And so, like, Tim, for our radio show, we have an annual theme, and our theme here these last couple of years has been this idea of perception. In my world of physiology and sports science, right, we have a really good understanding of how to train the body and how to increase speed, strength, power, range of motion. We understand the physiology really, really well. And it's interesting, over my career, it sounds just like yours, just in a search to help athletes perform better, help my athletes perform better. I've kind of gone through these crazy phases where, hey, the strength thing at the start was the number one thing. If we're going to have athletes perform at their highest, we need to make sure they're prepared properly for the sport demands, right? Which kind of makes sense. But then you start thinking about, man, okay, we're doing all the work, everything's humming along, but we're still only getting to here. So then I dive in, of course, to biochemistry and nutrition, and really get into the understanding of that. And then, of course, after years of that and still hitting hard ceilings, then I kind of got to the point, and this is sort of where our paths cross. I got to the point where, hey, we are missing what, there's something greatly missing here. And for me, it started, Tim, at University of Calgary with Dr. Joan Vickers in that physiology class, where we started talking about perception, cognitive decision making, and how vision works. And of course, Dr. Vickers and her work with the quiet eye really got my mind racing. So it's kind of cool how we've come to this point. But I think you're right. We're at a point in sport in general where it's very exciting. I think we're at one of the most exciting times in sports because of, I guess what we know about the brain right now, but how we're now pushing forward to better understand how it all works. Is that fair? Does that resonate with your experiences?
It's a great time to be alive, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Never in the history of mankind have we had so much information at our disposal. So, we just have to do our best because the learning curve is so steep now. It's so sharp, that we have all this information, and it can trip us up. We see that a lot in sports. You get a lot of gimmicks out there. You get a lot of different kinds of people trying to manipulate the system that have very limited information. And you can hear it in their conversation. You can hear that they've studied a little bit, but they haven't studied a lot, and I'm with you there on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, I don't blame anybody, I guess, because you only know what you know. But there's also an opportunity now with this computer age and artificial intelligence. The door's wide open for learning, as you've done for the last 30 years. And, as we've really been diligent in trying to open these doors and solve these puzzles and crack these codes that are pushing human performance forward. And when I come to sport and getting to know the V-Flex, I'm going, hallelujah, this makes sense to me. And here's hey, let me kind of sum it up for everybody. Tim, you let me know if I'm on track here, okay? So,
Okay.
if we're looking how we're kind of traditionally, let's talk baseball, for example, because V-Flex is heavily accepted in the baseball world, which is great. Now you guys are branching into other sports, which is exciting. But typically we would say, okay, guys, there's the target, throw at the target, right? That's kind of how the whole learning process has been up to this point. We kind of really instruct our athletes, boom, 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 and we kind of throw towards a destination. We know what's going on. It's kind of that explicit kind of an approach of learning. But what the V-Flex has done, and we're going to talk about this today, so we'll clear this all up, but just to sort of paint a picture for our audience, what the V-Flex has done is taken the concept, the idea that the strike zone doesn't really exist in space. It doesn't exist. Our brain creates the strike zone. And what V-Flex does, and correct me if this is clear or not, what V-Flex does, it helps us organize and understand spatial awareness and location in space. So our mind can not just throw at a target, but throw the ball through space where it needs to go. Is that kind of fair to say if our audience, isn't sure what this is all about?
That is really close. It's really good. Truthfully about space, that your brain is processing space when it's making those judgments of where that target is. The issue for us was creating an enhanced space. That was the ticket that nobody really understood. I didn't understand it. How do you excite a certain group of neurons between you and the target? Because the target is only refracting information into your eyes, but space being invisible, there's much more information that could be gleaned from space than from the target because there's multi-layers of space all the way through you and chances for the brain to update what it's seeing, So, yep, good job right there, Jeff.
Yeah, and I love this because I believe this is the new age, right? I really do think this is where we can take human performance forward. Physically, we're almost there. So in terms of perception, let's talk about this idea of perception, Tim, because for us here at the show, that's our main theme for this year. And perception is everything. One of the greatest sources of information that we have, especially in sport, of course, is vision. And understanding vision and how it truly works is one thing. We have all the vision experts, and we've had some of them on the show talking about, visual acuity, depth perception, peripheral awareness, contrast, all these 10, 12 different areas of how vision actually works. but all that goes into the brain, and now the brain's got to make sense of it, right? So we have this thing in our show as well that we call the crush brain game. And for me, that's the connector where we take all of this stuff that we're trying to do and try to understand how the brain is operating so we can push performance forward. If you guys, from the VFlex perspective, were going to try to explain to our audience perception, how would you guys frame it up for us?
Oh boy, that's a deep question,
Yeah,
My God, what a deep question
right.
because the game that we're playing, whether it's softball, baseball, basketball, football, it's all entrenched in perception. And you can tell it because of the tools and the language we've developed. All of the language that we have currently is explicit in nature, and it is only dealing with the perceived reality. Actual reality and perceptual reality are totally different things. Perception is built from raw information, and that's what VFlex does. We give better raw information, raw data, so that the brain can build a better perceptual reality. But now that perception of reality is not in real time. It's always, a half a second, three quarters of a second behind reality, real time, and I'm I've focused almost all of my attention on the implicit side, which is the invisible side, the side that when I saw how the brain wanted pieces of information, it doesn't want the whole cake. It doesn't need the whole cake to know that it's a cake. It just needs a bite of the cake. And it can tell you what type of cake it is. And when it comes to recognizing balls and strikes, for me, is that the brain only needs a tiny bit of information, and that information is going to be given to it by space. It's not going to be given to it by the ball. The ball is non-existent inside the brain. I mean, there's no real ball in the brain. There's only an electrical stimulus, an electrical representation of a wavelength or a wave of information that's representing that ball inside your brain, because the ball won't fit through your eye socket. So the brain had the task of converting some form of wave information into a baseball. And that's where we spend our time. We spend our time affecting the wave processes. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
love it. I love it. Sorry to interrupt you there, but I love it. You got me going here. Hey, so I just came up with the title for this show. I'm going to call it The Matrix of Sport Performance. Like the movie The Matrix, right? I
Yes.
love the concept. Like, people think about this. Like, I mean, and you and I have talked about this before, so I enjoy these conversations deeply. But the idea that, hey, okay, the ball's out there, it's a thing, it's matter out in space. But the idea, Tim, this is where the big shift is for me. This is where the line's drawn. The fact is that ball does not exist in our brain. Our brain has to recreate it, right? So
Yes.
this takes us back to a really interesting conversation we've had recently, just in our understanding of how light works. And I would dare say that that's got to be one of the early steps in understanding maybe the whole process. Is that fair to say, do you think?
If you do not understand the basic principles of light, you have no business doing anything in the spatial arena, as far as I'm concerned. You're just talking to hear yourself talk. You don't really understand how the brain is building its perceptions of reality. And if you, I mean, Richard Feynman, some of the greatest physicists of all time, I mean, they have concepts that would twist most baseball, softball coaches' heads off right off their shoulders, you know,
I get
because,
there. Hey, I've been there, man. I've been
you
holding
know,
my head on regularly for the last couple of years.
I've sent you some of that stuff, and we talked about, one of the basic principles that light doesn't travel.
Right.
It's everywhere already. It has no need to travel at all. Now, information may travel through those light waves, but light itself is not traveling. And that's the big rub in the game is that the ball does travel from the pitcher's hand to home plate, but that information is instant. It's not traveling through 60 feet 6 inches. It's already on the retina, to be honest with you.
Yep.
So hard to convey the language. Like I said, the language that we built the game around was explicit language. And I've tried to invent words. I've tried to come up with concepts that people would understand. And man, it is so deep in physics that it's hard to speak a language of sport, honestly,
Yeah.
Jeff.
No, no, and I agree, Tim. But I'm telling you, even what we're talking about here, just to get people maybe recalibrating their thinking. And here's the other thing, just like me, as I've gone through my career, and just like you, as you learned and really tried to work to understand how the brain works, the doors always seem to open. Something, oh, that takes me down another rabbit hole. I didn't know that, but that answers a few questions that I had over here. But now I've got 30 questions over there and 30 questions over there. It's like this knowledge tree that's continually growing, and I love it. And so, when we talk about the show and conversations like this, and one of the reasons I love having you on the show is you get us thinking, Tim. You get us thinking about things maybe we just never have thought about before because we didn't know about it. But the idea that light doesn't move. I think even in grade school, if I go back and I was talking to my 3 daughters about this the other day at dinner, I said, guys, hey, do you think light moves? They said, yeah, of course it moves. It goes from the sun to the earth. It takes 8 minutes and whatever it is, 30 seconds or whatever it is. I'm going, well, if you really understand how light works, it doesn't actually move. It's not this little particle, going from point A to point B, right? And they're like,
Right.
what are you talking about? I don't think it's taught in school, so people don't understand it. So we're kind of caught in this, maybe the old ways of coaching, Tim. And I think now the door's open for the new waves. And there's some early adopters that are kind of getting it as we're growing to and learning this, hey?
Yeah. A photon does not experience time. That's the problem with people is, I mean, they think that there are little bitty photons bouncing around everywhere,
Right.
like bullets, and they're not. Even though you might understand the concept of light taking 8 minutes to get from the sun to the earth, uh, at the speed of light, Einstein discovered that light never aged, and that was that the photon doesn't age. It doesn't experience time. Light is eternally young. It cannot age. Therefore, does that principle hold true inside the brain? And you have to apply physics where physics is. And that's the problem with tracking a baseball or throwing to a target or whatever. What you're seeing is your brain's best interpretation of the raw information.
Right.
And all you can do is alter that raw information, that invisible data, the wave processes that the brain has to process to make space.
Yeah, I like it. Well, on Instagram, and for people, I'll post this. I'll post this in the show notes here. But you had an 8-part series that really took us through an adventure through this whole idea and concept, right? And it started off with this idea of above the noise, getting above the noise. And I think that was more about getting down to true understanding and how the old ways work. Sort of that explicit learning, man. We see that, so let's go to that, as opposed to potentially the new way of coaching and training, which is, that more explicit or implicit approach where athletes have to go out and learn to organize inside of their environment. But what the VFlex does, and one of the things I'm really curious about, and to see how it really influences the outcomes is as you said, giving an athlete better spatial information or cues in the spatial field, so the brain has maybe some what would I call it? Maybe some references to make better decisions or better interpretations.
Better interpretations.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yes. Getting above that noise has been difficult. I will say that. But
Yeah.
you hit it right on the head. I mean, the way you
Yeah.
explain it, I think people understand it.
Yeah, and I love it, Tim. So let's dig in this a little bit deeper. So, like in my experiences in my career, right? It was all about the physical world when I started. Physiology, neurology, training the body to be faster, more powerful, become stronger to enhance sport outcomes. Okay, that's the output side. But in sport, we also have to deal with the input side, right? So mechanics are, everybody's so focused on mechanics. And I think if I were to really throw it out there, this is where the big opportunity is, because it's not really about mechanics. That stuff's pretty easy. I think it's about what we do, what the mechanics are for, and how we use those mechanics. That's maybe a more important part of the story, and that's kind of goes along, I think, with that idea of getting above the noise, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, it's all been about mechanics for years and years and years and years and years, and that's all you hear. Uh, but how to affect those mechanics from the visual cortex to the motor cortex has to be, where we make the main shift.
Going from like the conscious side, right, to the subconscious side is kind of what you've mentioned earlier. And if we were going to frame this up for our baseball folks with spring training coming in, how would we explain that to a group of coaches right now who are going, okay, hold on, I've never heard of any of this before. What do you mean by going from conscious, like the analytics? And Tim, we all know, you and I've talked about this, the numbers in baseball right now. Oh my goodness. But what do all those numbers actually mean if we don't truly understand how the brain is perceiving and helping our body operate in space? There it is. Awesome. We're back.
Sorry about that, man. I
Nope.
don't know.
No worries. No worries. So I just kind of asked, yeah, I just kind of asked about, the idea of going from all these analytics and everything in baseball we're having. How are these numbers, all these numbers, actually useful if we're not truly understanding how cognition, subconscious cognition works? That's kind of the theme. I don't know if you have an answer for that.
Well, that's the only language they know, and it's kind of like this dogma that we've been in for so long is you guys practice these drills that I've designed for you because I observe you from the outside, and what I'm seeing is this, and this, and I'll give you these drills, and then we'll come back in a day or two, and we'll see if those have changed anything or not. And truly, for me, it's similar to what's happening in the medical community where they want real return customers. They'll give you something, but they won't give your body really what it needs to heal itself because the body, it's not the pill that's healing the person, to be honest with you. It's the body's interpretation of that information that it's receiving from that medical intervention, to be honest with you. So you want them to heal from the inside out, and they're going from the outside in. And that's the problem with this. All the data that you see, false positive after false positive, it'll look really good on paper. It'll look really good on the screen. The guys will do great in their drills. But when they get out into space, where all of their information comes from, they falter. And then they wonder, I wonder why I'm not doing so well. And it's because your hitting instructor didn't understand space. He didn't understand the matrix. That this information has to come through a neural network, not a mental construct. The strike zone, they've tried millions and millions of times to construct a strike zone mentally, but VFlex is the only product out there that can construct this neurological strike zone because you can't see it, but the brain can see it because the brain does see the matrix.
Right. Hey, could we call that sort of a primer, like a neurological primer? We're sort of setting the stage for the brain to do something we need it to do.
Oh, that's you're recruiting neurons for that purpose because
Yeah.
it can't just do that out of thin air, and you can't do it with thought. I mean, that's been the one of the other big things that they've tried to do is concentrate more, focus more, and bring your mental capacity to its highest level. And it's like, well, a thought costs you about 30% of your brain's power. So why do you want to try to think so much? It's like the brain only has so much energy to do its job. If you put a phone to your ear, you'll lose about 24% of your visual processing power. That's why it's illegal to try to drive a car and talk on the phone. Not only are you distracted, but it's stealing energy from your visual cortex to run your auditory cortex.
Right.
And when you think, and while you're at the plate, you're stealing energy from your visual system. So the only way you can help that hitter is to do it in the background, in the neural network.
Right. Tim, I love this. I love this. This idea of the brain budget. This is a very, very important concept for not just coaches, for teachers, for parents, for athletes to understand. Hey, do you mind if we spend a little more time just maybe clearing that up? I love this idea of the brain budget because there is only so much capacity in there, right? So, like, for example, if I am looking at my hitters and I've got a coach with a young hitter saying, hey, see the ball, look at the ball, keep your eye on the ball, right? If I'm spending all my brain energy trying to see and locate an object in space, I do not have enough time or enough capacity or enough brain power or brain budget to then really, really harness the time side of it as the ball travels through space. So it's kind of a yin and yang here. Is that, you know what I mean? I love this conversation.
Yeah, you can't, the more you think, the more you try to concentrate, the worse you'll actually be. You have to free your brain up to do its job. I mean, we talk about that light traveling from the earth to the sun. It takes 8 minutes to get here, et cetera, et cetera. It takes the ball a certain amount of time to get from the pitcher's hand to home plate and all that stuff. But the speed of light, if you try to calculate the speed of light into this equation, uh, the speed of thought, how fast can you actually concentrate? How fast does a neuron talk to another neuron? What is the speed of thought? They've been trying to quantify that for quite a few years. It's somewhere around 284 to 300 miles per hour. That's the speed at which an electrical impulse will travel through your body, specifically your brain. But the information that we are receiving in space is traveling the speed of light, which is not traveling at all, which is the makes your mind twist around. So it's not traveling at all. So it's instant. Uh, if you would go around the earth at the speed of thought, take you 3.5 days to get around the earth one time. If you go around the earth at the speed of light, you go around the earth 7.5 times in 1 second. What
Right. Yeah,
you are
that clears it
not,
up. That clears it
you are
up right
not,
there.
you are not in the present. And I hear that all the time in psychological circles is be in the present, be where you are. And it's like, buddy, you're about 27 days behind. If you want to, the present's already out there ahead of you.
Yeah.
The ball is already, the brain has already determined where the ball is going to be for the most part by the time it's traveled this very short period of distance or period of time.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great a point to maybe jump ahead here. And I like it, right? Where, we start thinking about time. This is where you can lose your head here, right? Your head's popping
Uh,
off because, it's how our brain perceives all this stuff and how our brain puts it together. So as you mentioned, our thought processes are very slow. We know that ball. We know the speed of light is almost instant. Photons do not experience time, right? It's instantaneous for them. So we kind of got that concept. Now, a pitcher's winding up to throw a ball, and I've got my hitters. They've got their gaze patterns and everything. I think a clear understanding here would be what does a hitter really need in order to collect that? Tim, I think you mentioned something that's critically important in this big equation. Our brain needs just a finite amount of information, and what the brain does, and correct me if I'm loose or a little inaccurate here, but what the brain does, it takes those bits of information and it forecasts, it calculates, it constructs the situation based on the information it has. What we're trying to do is get better information so our brain can construct better sequences or outcomes or decisions. Maybe would that kind of take us in the right path here?
It would. You're really just trying to help the brain organize those signals better because at some point it has to store that into memory of some kind, whether it's short-term working memory, long-term memory, whatever you want to say in a short loop reflex or long loop reflex, doesn't make much difference. The issue is it's that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, let's talk about it. Like, out there in the world, I think every coach has the great intentions of trying to help their athletes get better. And the idea of coaches now opening their minds to this sort of thing, I think it's really, really important. But again, it's hard to open your mind to something you don't understand. And that's why I think this is something that's going to take a little bit of time. But for those early adopters, and I mean, we have 17 major league teams using VFlex right now, a ton of college teams. It's now getting down into the developmental ages, which I'm most excited about. I'm telling you, it's been interesting for me, Tim, on a sidebar right now. It's been interesting for me. I've been lucky enough to work at the highest level of sport in so many different sports. But I really, as I grow and I start understanding the bigger picture, I am so passionate about helping young athletes and changing their trajectory in a way that I wish our current elite athletes had. And again, that's where I often say, I don't think we're even close to seeing the true limits of human potential in sport anyway, because of the way we're developing our young athletes at the early start. They almost we're giving them misinformation almost. What do you think about that?
We are, the big push for us. We've been at the higher levels for a while. We've seen the improvements with the great athletes, and we know that the younger brain that's more plastic and more adaptable going to do much better if we can get them the same information. And we don't really know how concentrated those neural nets will become if you keep exposing a muscle to extra weight, for example. Those muscles in your physical world where you've been for a long time, those muscles always respond to resistance and nutrition and the things that you guys, are so efficient in. But we haven't done that for the brain. We have really just structured this mental uh, arena for them to work in, but we haven't went through the eyes with tons of raw information that's spatially enhanced so that the brain can begin to organize the strike pathways versus the ball pathways, because for a certain period of time they'll both travel in the same down the same street, but then there's an exit ramp real quick for the ball, you know uh, and then there's an exit ramp really close to home plate for the ball, you know. But there's a way to help the brain understand where that ball is in space. If you can provide more neural nets for that uh, interpretation, I mean, you're going to really help that young athlete, and he won't even know that that's occurring. I mean,
Right.
that's the mastery of VFlex and the mastery of implicit training is this player will have no idea why they are getting better, because it's not like lifting weights where you see the muscle grow and you feel the strength grow. You will, after a period of time, you'll start hearing that bat pop a whole lot louder. You'll see the ball go a whole lot farther. And you might attribute it to, hey, I've been in the weight room and I've been doing this. So implicit training and learning is often hidden behind that performance, that it makes it easy for that coach to say, see, I told you so. If you would have kept your hands back, well, I knew you were going to be much better hitter. If you didn't open up so much sooner, you would have done that. But in implicit training, you're forcing that motor cortex to set a different threshold because you're loading the neurons different than ever before. The problem with implicit training is you can't go in there and look at all that.
Right.
You have to the brain.
Yet.
The
Yeah.
brain won't let you. It won't let you come in there. But you do get to see the printout. You get to see more doubles, triples, and home runs
Right.
without an extensive amount of weightlifting and physical training. It's just that the brain is processing and organizing that light a whole lot faster.
Hey, Tim, if we were to look, just sticking to baseball, there's so many sports we could talk about, but just sticking to baseball here. If we were to look at the great hitters of our time, when we know who they are, we could talk about all the great hitters of our time and right now, and even in the past, we can go back to Ted Williams and Babe Ruth and Garrick and all those guys. Those guys, throughout the generations, maybe let's talk about all the great hitters who really excelled, not because they're bigger or stronger. Everybody has bat speed. Everybody's got all these things. But how many of those guys do you think kind of figured this stuff out on their own, right? Maybe they connected some dots just through trial and error over time.
They came to an awareness, no doubt, because all that had to come through their body. I mean, there had to be feedback systems that were telling them that, hey, I am making progress here. I'm going to keep doing this because yesterday I was 4 for 4. I was in this same position. And they kind of, what you would say, mentally figured it out. But to begin with, they had to have had superior brains. Their brain had to be better at organizing information. And we see that on the IQ side, where people that are really smart, I mean, they organize things into places they're supposed to go, and it's easier for them to pull back and recall, et cetera, et cetera. And those elite athletes, to me, were just blessed athletes. They had a superior brain. Didn't have anything to do with how smart they were, to be honest with you, but
Right.
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
I look at it a lot like you're up there in the North Country, and I know you know what a truckload of wood looks like if you just throw the wood in the back of a pickup truck versus stack that wood in the back of a pickup truck.
Beautiful.
You understand the concept that you'll use that space much more economically if you'll stack that wood in the back of that truck versus just throw it in the back of there.
Oh, that is a great perspective right there. Talking about perception and perspective. That kind of connects a few dots for me, Tim. That's a beautiful thing. I'm going to use that. The truck analogy, right? And we do it all the time. Throw a bunch of wood into a big stack, and you have maybe half a cord. But you start stacking that stuff, organizing it, and putting it there with purpose. You can get a lot of wood on that truck. You can get a lot done in the same truck, right?
Oh, you can bust the tires on the truck like that.
Yeah.
You can load the system, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with V-flexes. We're trying to create these electrical currents that are much different in ratio than the natural ratio, because if you don't load that visual system down with implicit information, there's no way for those neurons to gain strength or to carry more current. When there's a overload of information, in a high intensity baseball game, and the brain is actually packed full of adrenaline and dopamine, and all these neurotransmitters are running wild in the brain. If you have a healthier neuro set, your players will perform better. They won't choke, as we would call it in the game. So that's why I like helping the brain organize so it can increase its carrying capacity for the same amount of space. Space is constant. I mean, it's just like light. It's not changing. It's just what it is. But you can create more efficient parameters inside that space.
Right. So, okay. And that's great. I love that. Space doesn't change. We're operating within an environment that's fairly constant. And yet we have a pitcher that's trying to change speeds, add some movement onto a ball. All we can do is help our hitters set up for the greatest percentage or the greatest optimum situation to have success. And yet, with everything we know, strikeouts are on the rise, right? Velocity's climbing, strikeouts are on the rise. We're seeing these cool changes in the analytics of the game. And I think that's why we're so primed for something like this. So, Tim, we talk about the practical application side and understanding swing thresholds, because this is definitely a combination of, what the brain receives, and then having our body operate based on that information. So the mechanics are still important, but those two worlds have to come together at some point.
They do, and helping your visual cortex communicate better information to your motor cortex will be an instantaneous thing as well. Just like we're saying that light doesn't travel, the information that is so tightly attuned to each other, the visual cortex, the motor cortex, and the speed of these electrical impulses inside the brain, almost instantaneous. So you just have to be aware that a lot of people call that perception action coupling, where you see something and you put a put an action to it, but the brain had to go ahead and do that. We're just trying to expedite that for that brain, before it reaches a conscious state,
Right.
honestly.
Once it gets to the conscious state, it's too late. It's way too late, right? I mean, that's just
Yeah.
too slow. You know,
It
some of
is,
the
but that's what the guys are seeing. I mean, I, I have a hard time when I talk to a lot of guys. It's like, well, did you see that guy make this adjustment, on the curveball, but it's like, no, he didn't. I mean, it just looked like he did. His brain made that adjustment and his body followed through with the domino effect. Once the brain determined exactly what was happening, then the body had to follow through with that. And it just looked like he made the adjustment. And it felt like he did because it was happening in his perceptual realm. But he never knew why he was able to make those adjustments. He didn't know if it was his big toe, his knee, his hip. He couldn't tell you which one of those muscles actually made the major adjustment. And it's like, I don't know. I just know I hit the ball.
yeah. You make me think of Vlad Guerrero Senior. Golfing those balls out of the dirt. He just, boom. He's not thinking about that. But Ichiro Suzuki as well. I guess maybe one of the greatest. I want to call him a slap hitter, but he could hit absolutely anything. Maybe because his mind was working a little bit differently. If you look at it right now in elite baseball, only about 20 to 25% of all strikes are hit hard. What a massive, massive opportunity for a player who can crack that code, or an organization.
Yes, that's we swing at balls. Balls are hit hard 2% of the time. Strikes are hit hard about 20 to 25% of the time. And if you can train that brain's threshold for gathering information where it can identify a strike, and you get to about a 85 to 95 percentile, then you're going to be an elite athlete, because the average player can't do that. The average player is about 48 to 55. If you're really good, you're at 60%, of identifying it, not hitting it hard, but at least identifying that strike,
Right.
and that's the primary focus for what VFlex does. Is we're not really interested in the outcome as much as we are, what was the trigger mechanism? Did you trigger on a strike or a ball? And I always tell people, when you make a mistake at the plate swinging at a ball, were you looking for that ball, or was that just a strike you misidentified? And if it's true, if you were a strike hunter and you're always looking for a strike every pitch, and you swing at 30 balls in a game as a team, your team misidentified 30 pitches because they were looking for a strike, but they misidentified them as balls and went ahead and swung at them. So
Yeah,
it's
and
a
those
simple
are hard
concept.
numbers, right? That's kind of a
Yeah.
cool take to help people understand how this works. I'm really interested in the idea of thresholds, right? And recalibrating the thresholds, and using, a tool like VFlex to actually help recalibrate those thresholds, because just left out in the wild, back in the caveman days where we're out hunting for food, picking berries and stuff, our brain, we needed our brain in a very, very different way. The world of sport is challenging us, I believe, in a way that might be unnatural, but it's totally trainable. But this idea of altering, changing or shifting the thresholds of the brain, I like this concept, Tim.
Well, it comes back to that law of conservation of energy, that distribution of energy inside the brain. I mean, some of the guys I think are overlooking, in the old days, the stadiums didn't look like they do now. There were very few seats, compared to today. And now they're encompassing all of the peripheral vision in the brain. The brain has to make every single seat, every single person in the seat, every light pole, every concession stand. Even though you're not truly consciously aware of it, your brain is running these wave programs in the back. The wind is always blowing, per se. And, trying to help the brain manage that into a cohesive expression of, hey, I'm going to let all that go because I want to use that energy to see the strike zone better, because I'm going to receive a reward. If I can sit here and wait on a strike, my brain will give itself dopamine. You'll get
Yes.
this great reward if you can convince the brain to wait on that strike. Now, the mind can't do that. That's the problem with the mental side of it, is it doesn't control that threshold. It might have a tiny piece of input to it, but 99.9% of that information is going to come from space.
Right. Yeah. And I like that. The dopamine response, the reward response, right? Just like a good chocolate chip cookie, man. You want your dopamine flying, man? Go have a good chocolate chip cookie if you're a cookie person, right? But I
Yeah.
like that idea. And I do like it. So what we're really talking about here, if we really cut to the chase now, as we kind of wrap up here, Tim, is what we need to do is, and does this kind of do it justice? I'm trying to simplify it here. We need to help our hitters, pitchers, athletes in general just understand the important tendencies. What you said about the peripheral vision, people, I hope you caught that. When you go back and re-listen to this show, listen to the part of where Tim's talking about the periphery and 25, 50,000 seats in the Sky Dome. If you're conscious of your peripheral vision, your brain has to construct all of that inside. That takes part of the budget, right? So would it be fair to say that, what we're trying to do is maybe organize things a little bit so we can pick up the tendencies that are important for us to get a really good outcome? Like maybe a tendency of a pitcher. Maybe we're looking for something in how a pitcher moves that's, we're maybe not even conscious of it, but our brain goes, ha ha, that's what I need. And then pow. Would that be kind of a really good way to help people maybe understand what we're trying to do here?
Rephrase that for me, Jeff. Say that
So
again.
yeah. So when we sort of wrap this up in a bow, and we try to put this together for everybody, everything we've talked about, is it fair, or would it be accurate? Accurate's not the word. To simplify everything into maybe a real tangible way of getting after it. What we're trying to do is help our athletes understand or pay attention to, maybe even subconsciously, to the things that are important to get a successful outcome.
Yes, that's part of the threshold deal.
Yeah.
You have 300 million more neurons in your peripheral vision than you do in your central vision. And if you're going to uh, alter the threshold realignment or help a player's threshold be changed, it will have to take that information from the periphery. It'll have to steal the information or steal the energy to run the extended high definition focus within central vision. Central vision's already in a decent amount, yeah, about 2 degrees of uh, focus there,
Yep.
but you have to help the brain steal that energy somewhere. And that's what VFlex does by adding prompting information, indicators, telling the brain, I want you to take this information here, 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 and here, and here. And at the end of each one of our indicators, the brain will fire an action potential, and it will take the information that was in the peripheral vision to create a true high resolution central vision, because we see in low resolution. You can't, because of the law of conservation, the brain won't break its own laws that it's set for itself. If it broke its laws regularly, you'd have to sleep more. You'd have to eat more. You'd have to do a whole lot more than we do. But the brain is the master at conserving energy. So if you want it to do something, you have to give it a task that won't cost it any energy. It the high resolution space that we are creating is not visible to the eye. It's only visible to the brain. So it does not exist in the material world. It only exists in the matrix. It only exists in the virtual world and not in an imaginary world, because the sticks that we put are real,
Right.
but they're causing an electrical impulse inside the brain. But now the brain didn't have to concentrate and make the indicators. So we
Hey, this is
become part of that.
yeah, I love that. That's great. I love it. And you can go on, you can go to vflexsports.com. Hey, that's kind of the analogy, gets back to the analogy of stacking the wood. We're kind of organizing things a little bit to be more efficient.
Yes. Yes. And if your eyes move away from that location, your brain will know immediately that that pitch is a ball. It's not a cognitive, oh, I'm going to throw these and tell me if it was a ball or tell me if it was a strike or anything like that. We work at a subconscious speed. I mean, we would like to work at 120, 130 miles per hour just so that your brain doesn't interfere with itself, so that the conscious mind has to sit back and observe what the brain can do. The brain can identify pitches almost instantaneous because that's what it does. The space inside here, very different than the space outside the brain.
Right.
If you believe there is an inside and an outside, because a lot of the information that we're receiving is going straight through us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But at some point, our internally constructs everything for us in terms of understanding. And that's one of the key things here. Hey, you mentioned something there. You made a little transition there. I'm not sure. I just want to make sure our audience picked that up. You mentioned the brain and you mentioned the mind as two almost separate entities. Very cool.
Yes, that's been one of the biggest stumbling blocks in the game of baseball, softball, sports in general. The mind is not the brain.
Yeah.
Modern physicists right now are at a crossroads of trying to really understand what consciousness is. And I think we've talked a little bit about that, you and I have, and I think vision falls under that realm as well. I think we know what vision is, but I'm not sure we do just yet. The brightest minds will not make a true determination of where vision is because they can't find the ball inside the brain. I mean, they
Right.
can't find a tractor trailer in there. They can't find a truck or a train inside the brain. I mean, we know there are component information there, but the holistic thing, they really are still struggling with that. And consciousness is the same way. There's quite a few people out there, really bright minds, that talk about consciousness not being a bottom up effect. That consciousness may not be derived from just electrical impulses in the brain, but within the electromagnetic field where consciousness probably does arise, to be honest with you, because that is the continuation of the electromagnetic being electric and magnetic. It's those are two words. Don't forget that, because
Yeah.
you have an electric field and a magnetic field, and they create each other in this pendulum of continuous wavelengths at all times, giving birth to each other.
Yep. And one of the principles of light right there, that electromagnetic field, right? And how light operates.
Yes. I mean, with the
Yeah.
instruments that we have today, it makes us think a whole lot deeper, a whole lot harder. And, you know, it's that cognitive dissonance where guys always fall back into what's easiest for them.
Right.
If the science and the physics becomes too deep and too hard, they'll go back to saying, hey, you need to do this drill, instead of incorporating, let's talk to your brain today. Let's see what your brain says about the strike zone, you know.
I love it,
But
Tim. And so, if we were going to help people simplify and understand how to do this, we would say one word in baseball for sure, and in other sports now, VFlex, right? I mean, what else
well,
can we
you hate
possibly?
you hate you hate saying that, Jeff. I mean, you hate not having options,
Yeah,
but there are no other options.
agreed. Yep, agreed.
There's no we've been selling product for 13 years. We've had no competition. There's no other implicit training tools on the market. No one seems to understand the true nature of implicit, that it it can't be visible. It has to be in the matrix. It has to be in the brain. And, being the first on the block, man, what a challenge it's
Yeah,
been.
yeah,
We've taken all of the arrows. We're but that's okay. We got a
It
pretty
is.
good shield because the physics and the science is as solid as a rock.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't go away from it. They're all coming this direction at some point. I'm just trying to not offend people, and say that, hey, you have to stop what you're doing. I'm just saying, add a little bit of this in right now. Get your feet wet. See if you can understand it.
Yep. Yep. And I think I agree with you, Tim. No, no, and this is why I love having you on the show. I want to thank you for coming on here again. But these conversations are what's going to push us forward. We need to have these conversations. We need to get people, whether they understand it right now or not, that's fine. But, one of the mandates of the show here, we talk about this in our meetings all the time, hey, look, because sometimes even when go out in the field, I just presented in Denver and I just presented in Vancouver, and you get around these like-minded people who are all trying to solve problems and look for answers. And they may be facing something I've never experienced before. They get me thinking about something. I haven't quite thought about it that way before, or I haven't thought about that at all. That's what these conversations do, and they're so valuable right now because I know we're not close, and I know this is the direction we need to go. Now, to be clear, there over the lifespan of an athlete, if we really look at implicit and explicit training, we still do need, there's a place for explicit, especially early on where we're trying to figure things out. But when that's
Absolutely.
solid, when that's solid, now we can open the mind to really, really tap into places humans haven't gone before. That's where we're going. I want to be part of it. We are part of it, I guess, right now, you know?
We are, but the brain is a self-teacher. I know we want to take a little credit for the early development stages of movement and everything, but the brain taught itself how to taste, it taught itself how to smell, it taught itself how to hear, it taught itself how to interpret the waves, that it had to learn. And then it provided that information to the muscles, but it took those in through the senses. And I'm just hoping that we can give the brain the credit that it deserves, and try to drift away from the mind because we think that mind over matter is the big deal. But man, that brain is, it's a masterpiece, man. The greatest conservator of energy in the universe,
Yeah. Without
in the entire universe. Trillions and trillions and trillions of bits of information passing from one cell to another over and over and over, and never overheating and never breaking down and replicating through the atomic exchange. And it's like, my God. And you want to talk to the person? I want to talk to the brain. I mean, the person has an IQ that is limited. The brain is untapped in spatial awareness. We have we haven't scratched the surface on how good a hitter can be. But I will tell you this, my thought is that the next 400 hitter is going to be a V flexor,
Yeah,
you know,
agreed.
because I know that if we train the brain correctly, we're going to see it respond. But now you're going to have to stop talking to the person, the conscious wavelengths. You're going to have to talk to the neurological wavelengths. You're going to have to be able to put information in there that the brain will say, hey, let's stack this together.
Right. You make me think of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? I mean, there's a whole other brilliant organism out there. They don't talk English. They don't speak a language. The brain has a language of its own, and I think VFlex is our first real communication with the brain in the sporting world, Tim. And I want to thank you guys for
God,
everything
I
you
love
do.
you, Jim. Hey, man, you know what? I just had a thought. He is our interpreter. That's what VFlex is doing for the brain. It's the
Yes.
link between the conscious and the subconscious. I mean, it is an interpreter of those signals for the brain. It breaks it down into its irreducible factor of this is a light signal. Hey, I process light all day long, but this is a different signal. This is a new, unique signal. And there are bottles passing through this space. Let's see what we can do with it. And boy, does the brain love to play the new game of light. we call it baseball, but the brain's playing the game of light, and uh, that's where we step in.
Oh, okay. I just changed the title of this episode from The Matrix of Sport Performance to The New Game of Light. That will be the official title of this episode, sir. I'm telling you, I got goosebumps. I got goosebumps because we have so much to talk about. We didn't talk about repetitions and, performing work and creating that environment and what to do in that environment. We'll save that for next time. Let's let everybody sort of simmer on this because there's so much to take out of this episode, Tim. Thanks so much for coming on, my friend. Really appreciate you, all your work. And, if there were a Crush doctorate for neurology and understanding of the brain in sport, you would be the first person to get it.
I'm not looking for credit. I'm just looking for adopters, people that want to come in there and like yourself and that aren't afraid to learn. You know, I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. Don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. Don't care anything about any of that stuff. But, without guys like you, putting the message out there, the game will never progress in its current state.
Yeah.
And we've seen that the strikeouts continue to rise and hitting's getting worse and worse and worse all the time. But you're going to be one of those agents of change, and I applaud you for it.
Well, thanks, Tim. And I tell you, and again, just even watching the Olympics, man, like, I'm blown away at what these athletes do, and looking at things like the half pipe, the big air, what these athletes are doing in space, landing on their skis. When they miss, though, I can't help but think of this conversation going, "Ooh, something's missing there." And for me, in sport, because I'm in my 30 some year of elite performance in sport, we are missing something, man. We've got the biochemistry down. We still have a lot to learn there. Don't get me wrong. Trust me, we've been working on that, for many years, trying to help
Mhm.
athletes with the biochemistry, nutritional side. That's massive. The training side, I believe we really got a great understanding there. We are missing something in the big picture, and this is it. This is it. And I'm excited to see where it takes us, Tim. Thanks so much to you and
This is
everybody
going to be
there.
a great year. It's going to be
Yeah.
a great year, Jeff, for VFlex. It's going to be a great year for sport. It's going to be a great year for you and your company. I'm glad to be a part of this podcast today, and I really do appreciate it.
Great, Tim. Thanks so much, my friend. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, there you go. I think you guys can understand why I'm so excited about this. I mean, think about it. Concepts like the brain budget. Like what is that all about? I mean, so freaking great. And here's what we do know, okay? So like in baseball, for example, thinking about baseball, and one of the teaching cues, one of the coaching cues, guilty is charged. Hey, really pay attention. See the ball out of the pitcher's hand. When we dedicate brain energy to picking up that ball, our brain budget gets diminished, right? What Tim said about peripheral vision, and in the stadium, in the peripheral vision, if we're paying attention to those 50,000 seats, our brain actually has to spend energy constructing that so we can put it together, conceptualize it, right? And that takes some of the budget away from what we should be doing. That's why we say, hey man, stay in the moment. Well, staying in the moment is one thing. Yes, we do know that athletes spend too much time thinking about the future. Very destructive for performance. We also know that athletes get caught up thinking the past. Destructive to performance. Destructive to performance in the moment, but also as you train, practice, and get ready for the moment. You need to be on task, saving your energy for what's on. But then in the moment, trying to hit that baseball, where is the brain's energy going? If it is dedicated to seeing the ball, our brain doesn't have time to process speed of flight. And so making contact is greatly, greatly diminished. And so this whole concept of talking to the brain in the brain's language, this I think is the next This is the next level of human performance in every single sport, okay? Now, we go back to a conversation we had earlier about Usain Bolt. Does Usain Bolt need that kind of energy to run 100 meters? I think he's got to be on task. I think his mind's got to be in the right place, but he doesn't have to connect, interpret, and understand a 102-mile-an-hour fastball or receiving a football in the chaos of the defensive line, right? I mean, or shooting a free throw in the middle of a NBA game, or saving that puck in an NHL hockey game, right? They're very, very different. So again, different approaches in the mind for different sports, different training of vision or different uses of visual information in different sports. It doesn't change the fact that I think there's still a massive opportunity at every sport and every level to really move it forward. So one of the ideas when we talked about light, for example, I think that's a fascinating discussion, and it's the place to start, understanding how light really works. It doesn't move from point A to point B. It's always there. It just changes form instantly. One of the analogies that's used by the physicists out there, the theoretical physicists that are putting all this together, is the idea of like light being like the ocean. Look, the photon doesn't move from point A to point B. It just changes form, right? It's kind of like one of the analogies they talk about is a wave in an ocean, okay? The photon isn't separate from light. It is light, right? So you see a wave in the ocean. There's a wave there, but you can't separate the wave from the ocean. Another great analogy is this. And Tim talked about this. He talked about that budget again, about creating a task that doesn't cost that much, right? And this is the next era of coaching and athlete development, I believe. This is where the secrets lie. Once we crack this code, I believe we're going to open athletes. We're going to open their minds so they can really use their physical prowess and their abilities, their tactical abilities to the next level, because we're limited by our brain, or our brain is limited by our physical abilities, by our physical, mental, and emotional states, right? Biochemistry is a big part of that. But we talked about the brain budget, and they talk about how light works. It really helps us understand how the brain works so we can teach it better, coach it better, right? So one of the analogies they use is, like in the stadium at the Super Bowl, for example, you saw the wave go around the crowd, right? Well, here's the interesting thing. That's a great analogy for light. And the state of the wave changes, or the state where the wave is changes, but nothing moves. That's kind of how light works. Everybody's in their seat still. The energy there changes. And that's kind of how light works. If we understand how this world works and how our brain perceives this world, we will definitely change how we coach it. And again, that's one of the things that I love about the VFlex system. And again, I'm not here to sell it, but I will sell it because every one of our baseball guys should be using it if they're not already, and most of them are. When I met Tim and tried to figure out what this VFlex thing was all about, man, oh man, the light bulb came on. I'm going, boom, that's what we're looking for. Because again, in my career, as I mentioned, I went through those phases, right? I went through the phases of the physical side, speed, power, strength, easy, done. We can do it. Any athlete, just come on down. We'll take care of that. But that doesn't mean you're going to perform well in your sport. Then we have the mental side, okay? The mental approach, the mental game, the psychology side. But then we have the neurology side. Again, the nutrition, the biochemistry, which we cracked with KP Sport for sure. But then how the brain perceives, how the brain works, how we message and talk to the brain. That's where the big opportunity is, right? I think this is one of the greatest, most exciting times in sport, and we're right on the front edge of it, okay? So I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I hope that wasn't too much. There's so many great nuggets there. I'd love to hear from you about this. And there's much more to come, okay? I want to thank Tim nicely for joining us today, and in a couple weeks, we'll be catching up with some more information on parenting and coaching athletes. And this is kind of going to be our theme as we head into spring and through the summer. We're going to talk about really valuable topics that are going to help you help your athletes. And if you are an athlete, I'm hoping you can connect the dots between what you are currently doing and maybe some adjustments you can make to be just that much better than you are right now. And again, that's the name of the game, right? All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Crush Performance.
Find out what it takes to be a top performer. Get the Crush blog, podcast, and newsletter at crushperformance.com.
Goodbye now. Don't forget to rise.